How's it going? This is Dylan with Dylan Talks Tone and DylanPickups.com with this week's podcast where we talk about everything having to do with your guitar tone, from the pick on through the guitar, the cable, the effects, the amp, all the way to the speaker, the air in the room. This is what we do every week, just talk about guitar stuff and how things sound and why they sound the way they sound. So this week, we want to talk about wire, the wire that we use inside the guitar and what effect it has on our tone. We're going to talk about two different aspects or main factors of wire and what the effect is, and some of the things that don't really have an effect. And the two of them are the quality of the wire and the type of the wire. So why does this even matter? Well, because wire is how the signal, after the pickup has made what it does what it does, and we'll talk about that another time, it has become an electrical signal and it is going off to the amp. So there are a few things that happen inside a wire. The first thing, when we have more than one wire in the same passage, so in a guitar cable or inside our guitar when we have a bunch of wires running around, there's something called parasitic capacitance. And what this means is when you have two wires next to each other, they talk to each other. Some of the signal gets lost off of the wire and it crosses over into the other one. So cheap wire versus expensive wire. This is where this main kind of statistic or specification really comes into play in this capacitance. And it's measured usually per foot, usually in pico farads. And I'm not going to, give you a bunch of specifications on wire. Just compare. If you're going to buy wire, just compare it. And you're looking for the lowest picofarads per foot in parasitic capacitance. And what this means is that the least amount of signal possible gets lost along the way as it passes through the wire. It also means, as a result of that the frequencies that you have created by playing the guitar and then picked up with the pickups are as accurately relayed as possible to the amplifier. Because if you have a high capacitance cable or wire, usually cheaper, less expensive wires are higher in capacitance, you'll lose highs. Highs are always the first thing to go. We always say this in a bunch of different discussions, but highs are always the first things to go. And of course, the expressiveness of the guitar, a lot of that is in the highs. So that's the main thing that kind of falls off. So quality of wire is definitely a thing. When we see a very, very inexpensive Asian-built guitar with very high capacitance wire, just changing the wiring out in the guitar can make a difference. Will it always make a difference? No, because the longer the cable run, and we're going to do a podcast about our guitar cables and the distance between the guitar and the distance between the guitar and the pedal board and the pedal board and the amplifier, and losing signal along that distance. But you're talking usually 10, 15, 20 or more feet. You can lose a lot of signal with low quality cable there. Can you lose a lot of signal in the 8 or 9 inches of wire that is inside your guitar? It depends how bad it is. Sometimes a very inexpensive guitar with very cost-cutting components can benefit greatly just from a wiring change, because all this loss that is happening inside the guitar. Okay, so you can hear it sometimes. Just the quality, and I'm not talking about. In not all expensive wire is the same. So do your research. You're looking for the capacitance of the cable, usually measured in picofarads, and you're looking for the lowest possible within your budget, and it's not expensive to get better wire for inside your guitar, okay? That's really what you're looking at. And you're going to say, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the type of wire, because a lot of times, first of all, I get this all the time because I use some stuff from Jersey Shore Guitar Garage in some of our crazy custom builds where we do, phase flipping and all kinds of half out of phase and serial and all kinds of crazy wiring. And he uses it's a PTFE, and I'll get into what that means in a minute, but it's a plastic PVC coated wire. And people have objected to that in the past, saying, well, that's not the traditional cloth covered wire, blah, 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 blah. It's not going to sound as good because plastic coated wire is cheap. Plastic coated wire can be cheap. It definitely can be cheap. And in many, many Asian guitars, very, very low priced imports, it is cheap. But it's not the quality of just whether it has cloth versus plastic or not. It's actually the quality of the wire itself, as we just discussed. That is a completely different conversation. So now if we're talking about the insulation on the wire, now we get into a completely different thing. We're still talking about capacitance, because when we talked about the amount of signal that cable can lose or that wire can lose inside that guitar, it always does it. Any kind of electrical circuit, anytime you have a wire, electricity running at any kind of frequency, any kind of varying frequency, especially, and when we're talking about audio signal, it's a very low voltage, but very high variance of frequency all the time as we're playing, right? That is the highest kind of possibility for us to lose signal, and we don't want to lose signal. Okay, so cheap wire versus better wire, that is definitely a thing. Now, we're always going to have that loss, though. We're never going to have that perfect. So what we do is we put insulation on top of the wire, and what this does, every different insulation on the outside of a wire has what's called a dielectric constant, okay? And what that means is it's its ability to basically keep in the electricity and not let it drift off to another wire and affect the frequency of that other wire. Okay? Crosstalk. It cuts down on crosstalk. That's basically what that's called, because you have two wires or more next to each other and they're kind of always losing a little bit and they're kind of canceling each other and things are happening, and you want to minimize that. So the quality of the insulation is definitely a thing. Now, inside your guitar, it's the same thing. The efficiency of that insulation could, over long cable runs, affect your signal. This is definitely borne out in your actual guitar cable that goes from your cable to your amp or your cable to your pedal board. But in the 8 or 9 inches or a foot long of wire that's in your guitar, it's a lot less of an issue. And PVC wire actually has the better ones now. PTFE is actually, I can't remember what it's called, but it's something. Anyway, there's Teflon in there, and what they do is they spray air into it and they make it foam. And so you see that foamy kind of spongy look of the insulation on the wire. That is to raise the dielectric to a very high level to where you're losing a lot less signal. And now, so basically, just because it has plastic insulation does not mean that it is a low quality wire and that your guitar is going to sound like crap. There has been this huge misconception because in the 40s and 50s, cloth wire was the thing, so it must be the thing, and this is the mojo, and blah, 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 blah. The bottom line is that PVC was not even invented until about the middle to end, well, about right around World War II. And basically, they had to come up with PVC to waterproof wires because cloth wires were found in houses, they were found in cars, it was found in boats. But when they started making submarines and warships, they had to come up with plastic because they could not have wet wires, okay? PVC wire was not even basically available to normal people until the late 50s, early 60s, mid 60s. Think about when you first start seeing plastic wire in guitars. CBS sale of Fender, right in the mid-60s. Everything before that had cloth in it. That's because nobody had cloth in consumer wiring, okay? Or nobody had plastic. Nobody had PVC in consumer wiring. So it's not it's better or worse. It's what they had at the time when they invented the electric guitar, bottom line. And the bottom line also is that good quality wire, if you look at the capacitance per foot of good quality cloth wire that you can get now, and there is a difference between good wire and bad wire and that stuff too, it doesn't make as much of a difference anymore. In fact, a lot of people like using the cloth wire because you can bend it around and it holds a shape and all that sort of stuff. But for the 1.5 foot, or, my estimate keeps getting longer as we talk about this because I'm thinking about the foot of wire. We always put 12.5 inches on our pickups, but you cut maybe a third of that off depending on the pickup. And then we have maybe another 6 or 7 or 8 inches in like a Les Paul, for instance. I just wired a Les Paul this morning, so I was just thinking about this. So you really you don't have very much wire, so you don't really have that much potential for frequency loss. The most important thing in wiring inside of a guitar has nothing to do with the insulation or the quality of the wire as much as it does your soldering, because if your grounds are bad, then the potential for loss is much greater than the difference in any kind of insulation type. Okay. So that's really the thing. So all these people that say, oh, cloth wire is the only way to go, blah, 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 blah. It's just not. It's a misconception, and it's kind of a tradition thing over actual practicality. Now, does that mean that you don't use cloth wire? Go ahead and use it because it's very, very good. It can be very good if you buy good cloth covered wire. We use it all the time. We use it on all of our single coil pickups, and we use it when we wire a lot of guitars because it works really well. And to the normal ear and really, really trained ears, actually, I was just talking to a friend of mine who owns a studio and does a lot of recording, and he actually builds a bunch of guitars, and he was saying just before the show tonight that he's done a lot of testing and he can't tell the difference, and the guy runs a studio. It's just you cannot quantify it. And I'm sorry, but there is no meter for Mojo. It's more of a taste thing than it is a practicality thing. That being said, very low quality wire in a very inexpensive guitar can benefit from a change to a higher quality wire, just based on the loss that happens in a cheap wire. So that's really the rundown of it. And it just gives you a little bit to think about. Don't worry so much about it. I mean, it's, everybody really flips out about what they use, but you don't really have to worry about it a whole lot. I will say that just do your research. Like I said, it's usually measured in picofarads per foot. And just do your research and buy the best that you can find. The lowest capacitance per foot that you can find of really any wire that you're using in your audio signal, whether it be your guitar cable, your patch cables between your pedals, your cable to your amp, which actually is not as important. We'll talk about buffers and true bypass in another episode, but all that stuff really, really matters in the longer distances. That being said, never hurts to buy quality. My name is Dylan. This has been Dylan Talks Tone. Hopefully you found some value in this. Check us out at dylantalkstone.com, where this will be available, and will be also available at youtube.com/dylanpickups. And if you have any questions or want to contribute anything, any ideas or anything for our upcoming podcast, feel free to do so via email, through the comments on this blog post or podcast, or on YouTube. We would love to hear from you. This particular subject was brought up by one of our viewers from a couple of weeks ago. This has been completely user-driven almost since the very beginning, and we really, really like that to happen. If you have a question, please let us know, and we will address it. If I don't know the answer, I will find somebody who does. So we thank you for your time, and we appreciate you joining us this evening. This has been Dylan with Dylan Talks Tone. You have a good night.